trip, and I'm just a little bit excited about it. I haven't slept outside my house for almost 2 years now. I haven't even been more than a half an hour drive from my house for almost 2 years now, and I suspect I'm not alone in that. But if you know how much I used to travel, you'll know that that's a really long time for me to have been home. In the olden days when I used to travel, I used to make a sketchbook for each trip that I went on. Like this sketchbook that I made for a trip to Montreal in August 2019. And that was the second to last trip that I went on before the world shut down. A month later, I went on a trip to Peru. Although I wouldn't normally make a sketchbook for a quick trip within the province, I thought this time it was worth making a bit of a fuss. And I'm going to make this one slightly different than the sketchbooks that I usually make. This one's going to be an accordion book, and rather than just using it to do sketches, I think I might do some doodling and other bits of art, because I have a suspicion we might have a lot of downtime during this trip. Anyway, I'm starting out with this mixed media paper because it's what I have at home. I'm making an effort to use up the art supplies I have at home before I go out and buy any more. And the sheets that I have are quite large. I'm going to cut them down into half, and then I will fold them up and make my accordion book. Usually accordion books are made out of long, narrow sheets of paper that are folded up. I don't have the right paper of that sort, so I'm going to connect these shorter bits of paper together. So once I've got them cut down to size, I'm going to fold them almost in half, but I'm going to leave a bit of a tab on one end that I can use to attach the papers together. And I don't usually measure a lot. I just eyeball things, and I use the first piece of paper that I fold to measure to compare my other pieces of paper to, and I'm going to do the same thing with all of them. Fold them almost in half and leave a little tab on the end, and then when all the papers are folded up, I will start attaching them together. And I'm going to use some double-sided tape. The brand that I use is Sookwang. I buy it at a local scrapbooking store, and this is really excellent double-sided tape. I've been using it for quite a few years, and it lasts forever. I've used other tape, and after a few years, it fails and the things start to fall apart, but this seems to last forever and ever. So I'm going to place a strip off the tape along the folded tab, and then I will attach the next piece of paper to the tab there, and I'll do that all along with all of the papers. And the paper that I'm using is Canson Mixed Media Paper. It's not watercolor paper, but I think it'll work nicely for what I have in mind for this project. I think there's going to be a variety of things in it, so I don't necessarily need to use watercolor paper. So the purpose of this trip is my daughter is doing her thesis project, and she needs to gather data at different altitudes. So we're planning to head up into the mountains and stay at a couple of different places at different altitudes that will help her to collect her research, the data that she needs. And now I've got my accordion part pages of my book made, and so now I'm going to make the covers. I always save the backs of my paper pads to make covers for my books, and this time it's no different. The pad's larger than my pages, so I'm not going to have to use all of it, so I'm just going to cut off the piece that I need, and as you see, I'm just using my pages to measure where to cut. The covers are going to end up being slightly bigger than my pages, because remember I folded that little tab over on each of the pages, so
this pad of paper was the same size as the full sheets that I was using, so that the covers will be a little bit bigger. And I happen to have this funky paper, wrapping paper, sitting on my desk, so it's a nice size to cover one side of my book, and that's what I'm going to use. And I'm using this Yes paste. This is some new glue that I recently discovered, and it's kind of, somebody described it as being like a glue stick in a tub. And after putting the paper on the cardboard, cutting off an angle on the corners, not all the way to the edge, I'm leaving a tiny little space, about 1/8 of an inch or a couple of millimeters wide, and that will just make sure that the corners are covered well. If I'd cut right up to the edge, then the corners of the cardboard would have shown through. And I have to add more of the glue, because I apparently did not put the glue on all the way right up to the edges, and it doesn't really matter what this looks like, it's all going to end up being covered up anyway, but I think it's just easier to deal with if all the paper's stuck down nicely. And after I've stuck down all the paper, I'm going to glue the page, the front page, right onto the cover. I'm applying more of this Yes paste onto the first page, and I'm just going to stick it right down onto the cover. And I'm really enjoying sort of buttering the glue onto my paper, and it seems to be working really well so far. Oh, and I've decided I don't need that last tab, so I'm trimming it off. And now I don't have another piece of this pink paper handy, and I'm going to find some other paper for the back cover. And I've been using this grid paper from this university lab book that I've apparently had around since 1996. I covered the back cover the same way that I did the front cover with the Yes paste. And then I decided that I wanted a ribbon to hold my book closed. So I'm using this peach colored ribbon that I bought in Peru in September of 2019, and that was the very last trip that I went on before everything shut down. I'm not sure why I felt it was necessary to buy some peach colored ribbon on my trip, but I did, and I think it's rather appropriate to use it for this book. That's my first trip post 2020. And there you go, now I'm ready to go on my road trip.